history predicting our future.
That's
incredible.
I truly believe it's job creator.
Some of the godfathers of AI are very scared of where it's going to go.
Hello and welcome to the Talk Auto podcast. My name's Ben.
And I'm Holly, and every month we are joined by industry experts talking about all the latest in automotive. And this month we have kind of a buzzword topic, don't we?
We're
talking about AI.
We are. We're going to discuss sort of critical themes that have been running through 2025 and what the outlook looks like for 2026.
So, our industry experts this month, we are so delighted to introduce Priya Lakhani, who is the founder and CEO of Century Tech, and also Martin Forbes, the president of Cox Automotive International. How are you both?
Really well, thank you.
Superb. Yeah,
we've been talking about football. We're happy.
Well, and particularly, is it Arsenal? So just so
it's on the record.
Yeah, I had to put it on the record.
Got that in there.
So just before we kick off with our super interesting AI chat, it'd be great just to get a really quick overview of your current role, your journey in automotive for you, Martin, in AI for you, Priya. Priya, if you want to just give us a really top level overview.
Yeah, sure. So actually I started off as a barrister, so very, very different. Then I ran an FMCG business, so selling food to supermarkets. So I know a fair amount about logistics. And then 12 years ago transitioned into founding an AI company, which all sounds a bit bizarre, but the common threads with my theme are really interested in having a positive impact in the world. And also I absolutely love disruption and innovation, which I know disruption makes some people feel quite uncomfortable, but I'm very, very happy with change and finding new solutions using today's tools and technologies. But that's mostly my journey, and I advise on regulation. I have an advisory role in government, and I also host the BBC News' flagship AI programme, AI Decoded.
You are the perfect guest for this programme, definitely. And Martin, just a quick overview for yourself. Obviously, you are president of Cox Automotive International.
Yeah. Well, Holly, Ben, thank you for having me.
No problem.
Also, can I just say, wonderful job you've been doing on the series so far.
Thank you very much.
It's been really good. Yeah, so I'm Martin, president of Cox Automotive. Been with the business about 11 years. What does that ultimately mean? So people might know we're a US mothership business. So I look after everything that's effectively outside of North America in the automotive space. Now, obviously, we're talking about AI. I might know a thing or two about automotive, but I'm sitting next to somebody obviously who knows a lot more about AI than I do.
Yeah, but AI is within every industry, isn't it, at the moment?
Absolutely.
And automotive is definitely one of them.
Absolutely right.
You know, it's something that is changing the world, and that is just completely, true. It's been such a buzzword of 2025 and will continue to improve and develop going into the future. But Priya, I guess AI is a broad term for a lot of complex terminology, isn't it? But what is AI and kind of how are we framing it in the podcast today?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the best question to be asked is what is it? Because I think people are talking about AI as this big buzzword in the last 3 years, and obviously it's become much more accessible to people. We've got these large language models, these chatbots that people are becoming very familiar with using, but AI has existed for 75 years, and AI has been transforming automotive and all sectors for a very long time. So when we think about AI, rather than just thinking of a chatbot, because it actually pains me when people say, I've got this AI plan or strategy and they're just using it to help them finish off their emails. I sit there and think, look, I know that's helping you a little bit, but it is so much bigger than that. Mm-hmm. If you think about all of the information that you hold in your business, all the information and data that we hold on social media apps in any form of a database. Mm-hmm. If you think about patterns and correlations in that data, and then think about building a machine learning model, right? Think about AI as not magic, because most people think, oh, how does that happen? It's just maths.
Yeah.
Very complex mathematics. So looking at patterns and correlations in information to then be able to predict what might happen next, so that it can help you by recommending something to you, like what movie you want to watch next, how you might sleep better tomorrow night, all the way to predictive maintenance, for example, for the industry that you're very focused on. So it's existed for a very long time, but it's actually a combination of technologies. There's machine learning, there's computer vision, there's large language models, but just think about it as patterns and correlations in data to then be able to predict the future. So I often like to say AI is our history predicting our future. And if we're able to zoom out a little bit and think of AI as something that's broader, actually we're able to think about so many use cases professionally where we might be able to take advantage of this technology. So often when we're looking at company strategies, we can go a lot bigger than thinking about these sort of co-pilot tools that most people are spending a lot of money implementing. There's just the world of AI is so much bigger than that, and really what I like to say to people is just use your imagination and go wild in terms of what sort of information and data could I collect even from sensors, like physical sensors, you know, on hardware, all the way to proprietary data about customers. Right? And then think patterns and correlations. That's quite an easy concept to think about. What happens afterwards? Can I predict what happens in the future? And I think if we can sort of open our imaginations and go a little bit wild there, you can start to actually come up with incredible use cases that are entirely possible using artificial intelligence.
Yeah. I love the phrase, the history predicting our future.
That's
Incredible.
Yeah,
I absolutely love the framing of it in that way, and something that, you know, maybe you're right, you know, people use it just in Copilot or ChatGPT and, you know, don't understand the true extent of to what AI
Such a small, it's a small aspect of it. And I think, you know, what we're seeing now is it's going to be the combination of that sort of technologies. It's the power of that technology is it uses our language. And that's actually really powerful when it comes to even proprietary data. So if we were looking at customer data, for example, and how much customers are buying or how much they're using something, being able to add AI models that use language means that that data becomes more accessible to every employee because you're able to make sense of it. Not everyone's a data analyst. They don't sign up for that job. They're not necessarily skilled in that profession. So the ChatGPT type example is incredibly powerful. Of course it is, and it's transformative in so many ways. But it's about thinking, how can I combine that with the data that exists in my industry and in my sector? And for example, in logistics, you know, and we're talking about auto here, in so many different levels in terms of the sector, think about what information you have within your business. Now, if I could look at that data and that information and apply natural language that I can converse with really easily and naturally. In fact, if all of my employees could do that and apply that on top of this proprietary data set that we hold, what would we know? And, you know, how can we make decisions once we've got those insights? So for me, it's an incredibly exciting technology, but I think it would be more exciting if people open their minds as to the fact that it's more than just the chatbot.
Absolutely.
And I shouldn't probably ask a question, but Priya, you talk
You
about.
can ask as many questions as
But
you like.
when we talk about, you sort of say it's been around for 75 years.
Yeah.
And I think people don't probably appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because it's only really become a big topic, certainly I would say even in our organisation. I think probably if you talk about maybe 2 years ago, AI wasn't a topic. AI is coming up in every single meeting. I go to Atlanta now and I'm walking down the corridor and I'm in every single meeting.
Yeah.
And everything's about AI.
Yeah.
And also obviously starting to, the next iteration, I guess, is then advanced robotics. And we're not talking about so much robotics today, but AI.
We can do.
But then what fascinates me, and I know you've sort of the question I always seem to ask, and I am fascinated with. So I always look at films.
Love
And
that.
I look at films in many respects, so like how people predict the future. So I've had conversations with futurists.
Yeah.
And I always ask about, well, when you go back and there's things like Minority Report and all of these other things, you look at what they envisaged at the time. Terminator has to be one of those, right? So 1984, James Cameron comes up with Terminator. So think about even that, the prior research that needs to be done. So back in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And the prediction of AI and the advancements of it going all the way forward with Skynet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always wonder around, because actually a lot of what these films have come up with years ago actually ends up playing out. If you can go back and you say, what did they see? Now, I'm not saying with Skynet, but obviously clearly AI becomes so intelligent that it starts realizing, doesn't it, that actually to protect the Earth, it almost needs to protect it, and it's the human beings that are obviously destroying the planet, the threat. So logically, it says, but how far does AI advance? And I know one of the things is, when does it start almost taking over? And I know it's a big question, but it's just kind of interesting to see how.
It's good that you ask it, because I think that's on a lot of people's minds, right? That's what they're thinking about. The reason why actually a lot of people aren't adopting AI professionally, even though it is the finishing the email application, is they're scared of it. And they're scared of it because of exactly what you're saying. And let's also not forget that some of the godfathers of AI, the people who've developed this mathematically, are very scared of where it's going to go. So what you're saying is not necessarily just this, it's not like a crazy fear that only exists in your brain. This is something that a lot of people have been thinking about. Okay, so to answer your question, look, firstly, we mustn't complicate AI by thinking that it's sentient in some way, like when will it think or when will it right, it is mathematics. However, it's mathematics with a goal, right? It's mathematics with a goal. Now, it is developing like reasoning capability. Now, if you give this technology, and let's say you armed, drones, the military with this sort of technology, and it's autonomous and it makes decisions by itself, which means we're now venturing into the term agentic AI. So it makes a decision without the human being in the loop. You could imagine a situation where it might, in your view, go rogue and go and do something that you had not originally intended it to do. Okay, you're also potentially alluding to AI that could sort of understand and adapt to new situations, which is this sort of idea of artificial general intelligence. The point is that the reason why there's more optimism in the world is because AI is not going to go and destroy anything. It's a bunch of complex mathematics and models that, even combined with robotics, this Terminator type thing, it's humans who can go and ruin the world, because humans develop this technology. Humans decide what the guardrails are. They will, either develop this technology and let it loose in that sort of, world and give it those sorts of capabilities, or they won't. So we're living in a really interesting time at the moment. This is a really important time, because we're going to decide what we believe to be right and wrong. And this is about combining the ethics, right? The right use cases, our values, and values differ. This is the challenge, right? Values differ in different countries, different cultures, just different people. And it's about what those guardrails look like. At the moment, and I just want to be clear to the audience, there is no AI that can do what you're suggesting. We have narrow AI, specific AI that's there to perform a specific task. So if you think about the AI that beat the grandmaster in chess, it was trained on, chess moves, right? It's not going to go and break out of its box and be all Terminator-like. It just simply doesn't have that type of capability. What we're starting to see is advanced capabilities with these very powerful language models, and people are talking about this sort of black box. Why does a particular model make the decisions that it makes in terms of what key features in the model are? And there's all this debate continuing. At the moment, these things are actually pretty confined, which is why you'll end up with some godfathers of AI saying that's absolutely nonsense, that will never happen. But the debate exists because theoretically, what you're saying could be feasible. So when I compared that event between Elon Musk and Rishi Sunak at the AI Summit a couple of years ago in the UK, it was the inaugural AI Safety Summit that the UK held.
You were there, were you?
I hosted it.
Oh,
I hosted that conversation. I hosted the conversation between and introduced them, and then the two of them spoke. And Elon Musk made this very sort of vivid example. He gave this vivid example of a drone that chases you up the stairs, and all this kind of, and I actually thought a drone would fly, wouldn't it? Really chase you up the stairs. It's like, but anyway, but he was giving those examples, and again, theoretically, you can see how that might work. But I think we've got to remember that this is why it's so important that everybody understands the technology, because we citizens will shape the future, because we will demand that these things be developed in a certain way, that policy is created by policymakers in order to regulate. And obviously, you're seeing regulation evolve and chasing innovation. And it's difficult with regulation because no country wants to over-regulate this technology. If you over-regulate the technology, you've just seen the EU claw back in terms of timelines of its very prescriptive AI Act. The problem is then you stifle innovation. You stop startups and scale-ups running this technology and developing this technology in your country, which actually affects the economy, it affects jobs. So there's a real tension there. But at the same time, I think we've got to trust the fact that, as long as we can keep offering these views, coming up with those scenarios, how do you mitigate against the risk? So theoretically, okay, right? You know, you've got Star Wars, which is another great example of somebody who just, you know, looked at robotics and AI and C-3POs and R2-D2s running around, and wouldn't that be a great next best friend for all of us, right? And it'll be trained just to like us and to do all of those tasks. Amazing imagination, and actually that imagination is something that everyone should aspire to, because you now have technology with capabilities that are far advanced than what we had in the 80s, which is your point. But also you have to be able to think about this in a sensible way, which is, you know, what should those guardrails be? What are the ethics that we're applying here? The debate that you're going to get, just to preempt some of, I think, what the viewers will be thinking is, but, you know, in the UK, let's say, or in the US, right, here are the guardrails that we would expect, but would that be the same set of guardrails in another country where they have very different values to us, or in fact, they're attempting to do something that we don't approve of?
Well, this is where I was looking, because
this is the
if you think
challenge,
about
it's
Europe, so
international
Europe,
debate.
I understand. You think about Europe, we're actually putting in lots of regulation, as you say, and governance around it, which is around innovation, and does it stifle it? But obviously the risk about cyber security, because that's something that keeps me up at night. You can with everything
keeps
that's
everyone
happened,
up at night in this
happened
space.
JLR recently,
Yeah.
but also the advancements of cyber security, which is probably the point about Terminator, was when you kind of that from that perspective. But then you look at let's face it, let's look at China. They don't have the same elements of regulation and governance around it. So do they then are going to get ahead of Europe? And then where does America sit in this race? So
what we're now venturing into is the geopolitical tension between countries, the race of AI. There's two races. There's two AI races going on. There's one between countries, and so you've got this US-China conversation. It's really interesting, actually. I met somebody who was recently in China who's very involved in the, you know, AI across industries, and he had a very different take about what China's doing and the narrative posed by the US. And the only reason I'm adding that to the conversation is I learned something by speaking to him, because even when we're discussing the geopolitics, it's this US versus China, and, you know, the US has to, you know, guard against certain chips being available to China so that they can't advance. And then you saw the DeepSeek releases, and there was one quite recently, actually, where they're, you know, it's open source technology, it's rivaling OpenAI, and how are they doing this without those advanced chips from NVIDIA, and, you know, all of this big conversation. And actually, I think it's really important to say that, look, when we look at it from the West, there's definitely a narrative of what is China doing? You know, it's for military purposes, we need to ensure that we're more advanced than them. But actually, you know, I haven't been to China and spoken to people. I think that's really important to say, because we want to offer, you know, a slightly balanced view.
Yeah, absolutely.
And obviously what the Chinese are saying is that we're just developing this in our own way for the same reasons that you are. And I mean, again, somebody needs to delve into that a little bit more. And I've actually found that to be a bit of an open space, which is really interesting. In the last couple of weeks, having had these conversations with a Chinese American entrepreneur, I just realised actually how many of us have been to China and had this conversation, or tried to sort of, you know, like look into this in a little bit more detail, rather than actually what may well be a Western narrative. It might be true, it might be untrue. So there's a geopolitical race. With the UK, it's very much about retaining position number 3. In a post-Brexit environment, how can we ensure that startups and scale-ups are in, you know, London or around the United Kingdom, not starting up in Paris and Berlin? And then you saw Macron, President Macron, join the race in the last AI Safety Summit, saying he talks about plug baby plug rather than drill baby drill, and the fact that they were creating this French ecosystem.
Yeah.
He was having a little dig at President Trump, obviously, with that phrase. And so so you're seeing this sort of scramble as to who can be the leader. The second is between big tech and big tech in the US.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting, because you're seeing the biggest financial incentive for people to win this space. And that's really often about the future of search, right? Who's going to own the future of search? Because what we've seen is this dominant Google that's doing very, very well in this area. But then you've started to see these new players like OpenAI. You've obviously got Microsoft in the race, and then you've got Anthropic as well. And you've got other, so you have, it's really interesting. And the future of search is just not going to look like what we think it looks like. And actually, this is important for the sector, right? When it comes to retail, for example, like direct to consumer, right? A consumer is not going to, in the future, be typing and then seeing a bunch of links and then clicking on the link and then thinking, oh, you know, what do I do with that? You're going to be speaking and asking a question. You're going to be shown the information, not having to go through other links to do the research yourself. And then you're going to have the opportunity to purchase in that moment. So these companies are creating an entire operating system within that large language model.
I think
And so this is really
it's
interesting.
so interesting also for within the automotive sphere, because automotive retailing is, it's the area that Ben and I are in.
Yeah.
And looking towards what AI is going to do for the retailing experience within automotive.
I don't think you're going to buy cars.
No.
No.
What's your prediction there? Go on.
I don't think, and I mean, I'm looking for a car, just so you know, right? So so our lease on our car ends in February, and I was thinking about this actually while looking for a vehicle, and I thought, in the future, I don't think we're going to be buying cars. These big down payments. I don't think we're going to be doing that. I think it's all going to be SaaS, software as a service. I think.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at like Volkswagen, Toyota, I was just looking actually at the Gartner study recently. So there's a Gartner study on legacy car makers and what they're doing in the EV space, but mostly the investment in platforms and technology. And I just wonder, I mean, it's not necessarily a prediction, but I think in the future, in 5 to 10 years' time, will I just be paying a monthly subscription? And that's really interesting, because then you're in a software race. And actually in the software race at the moment, if you look at China and how China's doing, right? And you look at, for example, some of the plays in the biggest markets.
Absolutely.
And this investment that you're seeing. And I was reading most recently about Volkswagen because it was in the FT, and I was doing some research in that space because I love understanding what every sector's doing in this space. It was fascinated, and I thought, I wonder if there's going to be a business model change from these companies where you're paying. I mean, you'll know more about it.
I was just about to say, Martin, I would love your input
Well, the
there.
reality is, I think you're right. The reality, a monthly subscription model is not a leap with how people are consuming cars today. So if you think about, certainly if you take the UK, we're talking about UK right now, 90 to 95% of cars are bought on a PCP or PCH.
Exactly,
right?
so you're used to paying monthly.
And when people go into retailing, they don't look really about how much it's going to cost. They just want to know what their monthly payment is.
Exactly.
So they're already in that mindset of
Yeah.
that monthly payment. Now, whether they think that's because it's a finance product or whether they end up turning around to a SaaS model where they're actually just, buying a monthly program for a car, the software ultimately, not necessarily the wheels and the metal. But if you then take that leap, I mean, if you're in Atlanta, so obviously we're talking about Atlanta, and I'm in Atlanta a lot. So when I get an Uber, a lot of the time I get an Uber, I'm getting an Uber turn up, there's no driver in the car.
Yeah.
It's a Waymo.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, and you just get in the back and it takes you to it. And the Atlanta traffic is horrendous if you obviously.
I was there.
I mean, it is horrendous. And these Waymo, these cars just navigate the complexity and the traffic across Atlanta and get you to where you need to be. You get out and it moves on. The good news, you don't have to tip a driver either. But the way we see it, obviously for us, it's around, I mean, you think about AI and it has been around, I mean, either it's, are you ever going to own a car? I don't think you actually do. And I think a lot of people don't think about owning a car today. But actually, is there a point where it's just a car on demand? Because personal ownership is obviously declining and fleet ownership is increasing. So cars will predominantly owned by fleets. Will you just, and I think about this we've got sort of similar age children, but will they need to drive or will they need a car? Because actually they just get their phone and they click a button and say, I want a car. Car turns up, there's no driver in it. It can go 24/7. EV cars now, as we know, don't need the level of maintenance and everything else it needs. So do you just actually don't need a car? You don't need that expense. Just click a button, it turns up, takes you where you need to go. Thank you very much, and you're on. Now, as that scales, that demand and ease, even in more, I know it's urban, but even starting rural, is it just the fact that you're just requesting the car to turn up and
Yeah, you don't need a license, you don't need to drive. In the future, there'll just be these
and technically
transport vehicles.
Maybe your kids will never actually get a driving license.
Can you imagine dial forward, I don't know, mate, you think about dial forward 50 years, whatever it might be. Do you reckon there'll be a conversation where years to come they go, my God, you imagine they used to let humans drive cars.
How many mistakes and how many
accidents and people lost their lives and stuff.
Absolutely.
What were they doing?
What were they thinking?
Is that going to be a debate or a question in the future?
Yeah, we had a really interesting conversation with Nick Thomas from Chang'an, UK, a couple of episodes ago. We did it on sort of software derived vehicles, and we started talking about sort of the skills gap within the industry as well. With AI, we've got these very specific large language models that the likes of Tesla and Rivian and VW are sort of deploying. Is there anything that you guys can see? Where does the workforce need to come from, I guess, moving forward with this move to AI? Are we going to continue to develop these really specific large language models? Are we going to get a platform like Google to just offer theirs out? Or are we going to be sort of seeing the OEMs doing it in-house?
You go first.
Well, I mean, so are we going to get platforms? There are going to be car companies that are too behind in developing their own software, where they're going to start essentially having, you either buy, you borrow, or you build. And they're going to borrow. And they're going to be using stronger platforms to be able to help them with their software models. That's clear. Some will develop their own. It'll be proprietary, and there'll be a lot of value in that. And Tesla's obviously, you know, it's been doing this for a long time. It understands what it's doing as a business, and you can see that there are actually groups of companies, the Rivian as well in the US. Yeah, there's a few that are doing very, very well in this space, and then some will borrow, and you see those partnerships actually in automotive quite a lot, right? And there'll be the value. The point is the value of the software piece, if you own it, is going to increase. That's the point. So the model will change. In terms of the skills question that you asked, look, I think, you know, people love to talk about, oh, all of these people will be made redundant and all these jobs will be lost. And that's another thing that Elon said, you know, that no one will need to work again. Actually, if you look at the history of technology, there's a whole debate about how people find purpose in what they do. And that, I think that might change. But I think more importantly for the near term, and this is really urgent actually for everyone who's listening in terms of my profession, you know, what might I look at in terms of new talent and skills and upskilling people? Technology has got a history of changing work, not necessarily getting rid of all work, right, and all jobs. It's really about changing the task and the task at hand. So how can you look at your workflows and processes? You should be able to define all of those, and many of those may be automated, but some of them you can augment using this technology. And there will likely be a shift, and the shift will be from those routine, mundane tasks that, great joy, you don't need to do those anymore, to thinking tasks, more strategic tasks. So given the data and the insights that I have to hand based on what machine learning, what AI can do for me, how now can I think strategically using those insights to improve that business function that I'm involved in? So a lot more cerebral, right? And a lot less kind of manual, mundane. And then you touched on robotics a little bit earlier. And it's going to be this, and that's not it. I mean, people confuse it, but we're talking about technologies coming together to perform tasks. But I don't know if you've got an opinion on the new skills base, you know, for this group, and also on, I think you talked about the buying, borrowing, building, and will we be reliant on new technology?
It would be interesting, just before you start, Martin, because the Cox Automotive US just published a report, didn't they, about how AI can help retailers. And obviously, we're not thinking about those huge models. We're thinking about the day-to-day, being able to have dynamic personalization, intelligent automation, and how just the day-to-day among retailers that AI will help. So I just thought it'd be really interesting for you to also touch on when you're talking about that skills section and how we develop that within automotive.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I mean, AI and then robotics going to touch every part of our ecosystem. When you talk about the automotive industry, I mean, remember, you're talking about designing cars.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, the old model of designing cars, typically from designing the car to production, you're 7 years ahead. Guess what? With AI now and the move of technology, that's 7 years. If you're doing that, you are way behind. Yeah. So everything from even designing cars to the production of cars, to then actually the transportation, to the point of actually retailing. I mean, and then everything that we might do and the disposal of car, everything is going to be driven by AI.
Yeah.
If you think about, and I'll touch on, if you think about the first question you asked about the software, I mean, look, fundamentally, the phone, if you look about the phone today, the phone is where we hold everything. And that's where all the technology is. You know, there's a question about when you get into a car, what are you getting into? You're getting into a frame with some wheels. What people are buying today, and I think brand loyalty is actually reducing, especially in the EV market. And I think the next generations are more important about what does this software offer me in the car.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you get into a car, you could argue that all you need to do is ultimately your phone is you plug that in, and that actually powers the vehicle. But you're right, you think about what Volvo are doing, for example. Volvo actually now is all on the Google platform. I mean, you get into a Volvo car, you put in your Google email address, you press return, that then sparks up your car. Everything is driven on Google. I mean, I never understood it really, where you get some of the car manufacturers, they have their own sat navs.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I
Never as, I mean, there were
It's so
never as good
frustrating
as
when it doesn't.
Google. I mean.
Yeah. Well, it's really frustrating actually when I don't get Apple CarPlay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be standard,
That's it.
really,
When you
shouldn't
Hire a
it?
car
There you go.
anywhere in the world. Why are you asking me to pay extra for some sort of navigation app? This should just sync with my. There was a manufacturer who is going big in China, and I think they said our car is literally going to be a smartphone on wheels.
That's right.
I think a lot of cars these days are smartphones on wheels.
Reading that quote
Yeah.
in the FT and thinking that's really smart.
Yeah.
Really, really smart.
Yeah, we've had-
and that's somebody who's got the vision of where this is going, rather than, oh, let me use AI for this task over here and then this task over here and then this. No, right, scrap that. What's the ultimate vision?
Yeah.
Where is this going? And let me build to that. And what can I do? And then there's the internal disruption of the workflows and processes and things that we talked about. But then there's the ultimate vision of exactly what you've articulated really well there, which is what is going to be the consumer expectation from this experience.
Well, this is it. My car needed to go into the garage, and they gave me a hire car, a temporary car. I scanned a QR code on the screen, all of my settings copied over, signed into my Apple Music, my seat position was there, steering wheel,
Seat
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How intelligent and
In reality, that's what you care about. You're caring about the quality of the GPS, and actually, to be fair, the quality of can you put your Spotify or your Apple
it linked?
music on, and does that just come alive?
Yeah.
And then, of course, and then it's technology around the sort of the safety, and that's getting onto the AI about the levels of autonomous driving around the safety. So I think that's where it's going, and I think this is where the concern are for a lot of obviously the incumbent European manufacturers as well, is because that brand loyalty is disappearing, and we know, and it's not a topic for today, but with the Chinese entrants, I'll be honest, their technology and electronics are just superior.
Yeah.
I mean, they just are, and they can produce them at a cheaper rate and better. So that's the big risk. I think if we go on to the skill set, I mean, you use the word shift. I think shift is absolutely the right word. There's a shift, and that shift is going to happen over a transitional period. Now, that transitional period could take, I mean, that could be 5, 10, 15, 20 years as that transitions. And ultimately, it's going to be about adaptability around skill set. But I'm a big believer, I know this is the debate, do I think it's a job creator or a job reducer? I truly believe it's a job creator. Because history shows us this. History shows us in industrial revolutions, like you use example about looms and powered looms for weaving cloth. I mean, it just shows that actually that sort of reduced, I think, about 98% of labour requirement in the production of cloth. But because of then they could produce it quicker and for cheaper, the cloth market just expanded and created more jobs. I mean, take it to the automotive industry and Ford Model T. So in the 1920s and the 1900s, 1920s, they started to use sort of more computers and production lines to actually create cars. So effectively they were producing, I think, about 8 cars for every worker. Over 6 years, that went to 21 cars per worker. So you could argue, well, actually, is that going to create job losses? That just reduced the price of the car from effectively $1,000 to $500. That then expanded the demand, and then you've created the need for roads, you create the needs for service, you create the needs for everything else related to that automotive, the retailers that are selling it.
Yeah.
So again, I just believe it expands. So when we talk about AI, what it's going to create, and we know this is going to create, it's going to create efficiencies. And this is where I get really, really excited. One, it's going to create efficiencies for corporations and businesses, small, medium, big, multinationals. That then is going to create more efficiencies, means you're going to get better output, you're going to be able to reduce costs. That means that then those businesses then can grow, and you stimulate the market.
Yeah.
But as Priya said, there is going to be a shift, because you're going to take away, and I look at it from our business, I don't see it as a job loss. What I see is excitement, because I want to take people's time. To be honest, whether you work in everything from a HR department, you think, well, I'm doing payroll. Oh, well, that's all going to be done by AI. No, that's great, because what we can do is take you out of doing that mundane job, spend more time with the people of the organization. We can get people taking off mundane jobs where AI can automate these processes. Spend time with the customer. Refocus your efforts to where you add more value. And then actually you can then, I think as an organization, we're going to reduce costs, we're going to become more efficient. That allows us to put further investment to grow. And it just again then cycles up. So I'm a huge believer, passionate believer that AI is not a threat to net loss. There won't be net loss of jobs, but there will be maybe a shift, but a shift to things that I think actually truly matter.
I think I agree with you. I think that and companies are really investing in this. I'm seeing this absolutely everywhere. Like, how do we upskill people? I think it's going to be on the person. So I think, the IMF says there's going to be a 40% change in jobs. And I think what we're agreeing here, theoretically, our view is the change is going to be the shift. It's not going to be major losses over here and then just major there will be some of that, but there's also going to be shift with it. And that word efficiency is really important because people are getting that very wrong. They're saying efficiency therefore equals cuts. Efficiency can equal cuts. Efficiency can also equal capacity. So what do I do with that capacity? And, look, let's just be straight in business. One of the biggest difficulties in business has nothing to do with the rise of technology. It's always to do with people. It's to do with change management. It's the friction point. It's, okay, I know what you've done for 10 years. We now need to change that. And we need to do it in this other way. And the thing is that as consumers, we've all become used to a form of disruption and change. So if you think about Uber, it's the most valuable taxi company in the world, yet it doesn't own a taxi. If you think about when you book a holiday, Airbnb is the most valuable accommodation provider in the world, yet it doesn't own a hotel. If you think about Netflix, it's the most valuable movie house in the world, yet it doesn't own a cinema, right? We have all been through platform disruption. That's changed the way in which I booked an Uber to get here today, the way in which we behave. And so we can change. If you look at online banking, the way that consumers are banking now, how many people had to get used to using those apps, right? There are not as many retail banks to walk into to have that one-to-one sit-down customer conversation just to withdraw £20, right?
Still not quite
That's still getting there, but you've seen all of those changes. So in the workplace, there is going to be an expectation for the individual to also take ownership over that. I can see that task, actually, it's not even just about AI being able to do that. AI can now give me an insight that I never had before.
Right.
What am I going to do with it? How do I utilise that? I see that in education all the time. So we're giving insights to teachers every day that are impossible insights to have of 30 kids in a classroom with you right now. How can I tell how each is doing? And it's actually a bit of a shift in delivery of teaching and learning, which we know you can do chalk and talk if you really need to. If everything shuts down, you can go back and teach that way. But it's about how do I leverage that? How do I take that insight that I would have never had, it's just impossible to have in that moment, and then change my delivery? So in automotive, how do I take whichever function I'm in, how do I take that insight that allows me to work more accurately, more efficiently, smarter, not harder? But I need to know how to utilise that. And that is really going to come from within, because you can have companies invest, training budgets. They can have people come along and talk about AI. They can say, listen to this podcast, right? Do X, Y, and Z. Unless the individual has this moment and the shift in their mindset, which is, okay, I'm going to actually take it upon myself to be curious enough to take that insight, to look at that automation function and think, now what can I do with that to spend more time on that complex customer problem?
That's right.
That job is going to change.
It's changing it to a
And so are you going to change with it?
And this is it.
And I'm just saying cold light of day, because I think there's so much that, theoretically a lot of people are saying, and they're very kind on the news when they come on as guests, says, it's all going to be great. We're going to have all these new jobs. They're all for you. And I really question, and I say, look, yes, they are, but it's going to be up to the individual to be able to have that shift in change. And because of what I've been doing in the last 12 years, working across a very large sector and seeing actually how hard change management is, and this is what most companies struggle with. Most companies struggle with the change. And there was that MIT report, and the MIT report on AI productivity, when 95% of organisations said that we are not seeing the gains in AI, having invested in the technology. Actually, and that was all over the media. We covered it on the BBC. Okay, you've got to go into the details. It's always about the detail. When you look at that report and actually read it, most of the reasons as to why people are not getting any form of ROI, right, return on investment on AI, is to do with people. There was lack of executive sponsorship. People didn't believe that the tools would do what the tools are saying on the tin, right? And people didn't change. There were a couple of bars in a bar chart where they said something along the lines of the tool's not performing as I expected. But then also I would question, what did you expect it to do? Because sometimes when I've seen people using chatbots, they're like, oh, now I'm sure it can just do my whole job for me. No, it can't think, right? It doesn't have contextual information. It cannot deal with that complex customer problem. It can deal with that simpler issue, but not the complex one. It doesn't understand the circumstances around that. It doesn't have all of the data fed into it to then be able to make that next decision, right? Or that prediction of what is the next best answer.
So it's almost making sure that people know what to expect,
right,
rather than working towards adapting their work process.
Exactly. Know the bounds in which this operates, but then you have to be able to think how to let it augment your work. It doesn't actually, so don't now expect it to replace you. This is the issue, right? And so I just think that is something that, when listening to this, is if you're running a small department, and you're not necessarily C-suite in the automotive industry, it's going to be up to you and your colleagues to take on board these new changes and think, how can I use them? Don't wait for someone in HR to turn up with a training budget, because I that's really difficult. Companies will do that because they're trying to invest in you, but you have to have that sort of open mindset to think AI is changing the world. So I need the curiosity from within to think how I can now leverage that and utilise it to my best of my ability in a safe way, an ethical way, to help me in my role. And that's just an ownership that I think all of us need to take within our roles.
I heard it put very succinctly, and I heard this, I can't remember who I was talking to, but what they said to me, and it resonated. It said, AI won't take your job, but somebody who embraces it, understands and uses AI will.
Yeah, there was a viral meme that went around.
Was that right?
Yeah, there was, and it went around, and some guy got a lot of followers.
And I think that sums it up. I think
it does, yeah.
Well, every company, I used to often say that, I used to say every company is a technology company, and now I've changed that to every company is an AI company. We're all living with, working with, or building artificial intelligence.
It's
so
so
you've
interesting.
got to get on that train.
I was at a Web Summit recently in Portugal, so a tech conference, and every single talk that I went to from every company, that might be marketing, it might be, there was actually not many in even automotive, in SaaS, in every single thing, and the talk could be on something completely unrelated to AI, but they would put AI in the chat. It would come in some way, shape or form. And so I completely agree with you, Priya, that every company is turning.
I think it's relevant. I think the thing is that it is so much, it's not one thing. When people say, I'm using AI, it doesn't actually mean anything. Yeah. It's a little bit like any of you saying, hey, tomorrow I've got some really big news. I'm going to use technology. Yeah. That's wonderful. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. 3 years ago, mobility was the big word. Right, there was a big buzz certainly in the automotive industry, and so everyone changed their name. All of a sudden, companies were their original company name, but they put mobility in their name. Right now, if you look at it, you've got the same sort of companies in the tech space or offering. Now they're just adding AI. Yeah. So all of a sudden now they're just. But what? So you've added AI, and all of a sudden, what does that mean? It's still the same. Yeah.
Predictive maintenance.
But it's the thing.
Yeah. In what exactly? And every model is different. So there's just no point saying that. What do you mean?
Yeah.
And so if you're in this particular sector, it's like, okay, are you using it for customer service?
Yeah.
Are you using it in terms of, are there sensors all over the car trying to predict when something, like Rolls-Royce is one of the best examples. Honestly, I keep talking about that company, and I promise I'm not invested in that company. I talk about it very publicly everywhere, just because I think that it's probably one of the best AI companies in the world that I've come across, because Rolls-Royce is using AI and has been using AI a lot longer than, when most people become excited about the technology. And if you look at an airline engine, for example, Rolls-Royce has gotten to the stage now where they're able to predict when a part might fail, to the point where actually their business model rests on the fact that they make money every time an engine's in the air. So actually Rolls-Royce can sell miles rather than sell engines, which is really exciting. So imagine that car selling, if we weren't in the, you just tap and it comes up, but there is some form of ownership, selling usage. Well, actually, I'm not sure that would work given the usage of cars is actually quite low in some spaces, but I don't know. Maybe that's going to be a competitive edge. So, how are you using AI? Are you combining different technologies with AI? What do you mean when you're saying that? And we're going to get to a stage. I don't know when this is going to happen, because it's already been a good 3 years now, the anniversary of ChatGPT coming out. Yeah. And I think people are still saying, I have an AI plan. And I ask them what it is, and they're finishing their emails using AI, and I'm thinking, okay, right, at least you've started. Yeah. I mean, that's the positive way of looking at it. But we're going to get to a point where people are actually going to say what the output is. And I think you've got to do it. There's a really clever way of doing this to be able to shortcut. Okay, so you're saying all of this. What therefore should I do? Right. Firstly, what is the output that you're trying to achieve? First, talk about that. And that's going to have everything to do with domain expertise and nothing to do with AI whatsoever. So what are the top goals in the business that you want to achieve, or in your department? What are the top problems that you want to solve? Now, look backwards. Is there a way in which machine learning AI can help me solve that problem or can help me achieve that goal? And then what you need to do is then think, okay, and what data is required in order to do that? So it could be about parts of a car. It could be about sensory data. It could be about CRM data on your customers. It could be about HR data and attracting new talent. It could be whatever. What data do you need to then predict that output? And then you'll go to a data scientist, somebody who understands this technology, or a supplier, and they'll be able to tell you the appropriate technology that gives you that output. But you need to think what's the output, and you need to think about what the data is. Mm-hmm. And once you're thinking in that way, you're expanding your world of AI to a level that is way beyond, I'm just using it, help me finish my emails. Because now you're expanding your mind. So that's actually what you need to do. List of goals, list of problems, work backwards from those outputs to the data required, and then go and speak to somebody who understands the technology. Mm-hmm. And if you're able to do that, you'll have a much bigger AI plan. And AI strategies, it's controversial when I say this, but rip it up. It's useless. Any AI strategy you've got written down is a complete waste of time. You shouldn't have an AI strategy. Unless
you're following the rules that you've just said.
So that's an AI plan. So the reason you shouldn't have an AI strategy is an AI strategy sat in a silo. That's sorry, but many of the audience will say, I've just paid hundreds of thousands for some consultant to come in and give me an AI strategy.
Just 100,000?
Yeah, just a few, maybe, on some really nice, sharp presentation that looks really pretty. It's a waste of time. An AI strategy sat in a silo is not going to work. And you're going to be one of those 95% of companies that doesn't get the ROI. What you have is a business strategy. You've got a growth strategy. You've got a growth strategy. You've got a plan to be able to create efficiencies. That's your key business plan. That's perfect. Now go through that and apply machine learning to that. Mm-hmm. Go through that and say, where can AI help me? Where can machine learning help me? Where would computer vision be able to help me? Where could all of these different types of models help me achieve these goals, these problems? Mm-hmm. So actually you're applying AI strategically into your core strategy. That's what you're doing. It's not an AI strategy as a silo. And then there's a separate discussion, which I think would be very fun to have with you, which is open your mind. There's the second part, which is just a disruption conversation. Where's this going? Which I think we started off with earlier, which is what does the future look like? Because that disruption conversation can often tear up your current plan.
Yeah.
And it's the open-mindedness to be able to do that. But those are the two things that you need to do, not have some pretty PowerPoint that tells you your AI strategy, because that's just like, who's going to implement that? No one cares about it. It's not linked to their current KPIs, current OKRs. It's not linked to any of that. You need to take what everyone's measured on and apply AI to that. That's what you need to do, and then you'll see a difference.
And that is a wonderful loop back round to, I think, wrap up the podcast with, I think we've got one more question, and you've slightly answered it there, but Martin, I'd really like your take as well, which is, what excites you most about the potential of AI in 2026? Now, this might be in Cox Automotive, it might just be in general, but what excites you the most about the implementation?
I'm probably going to take it from our side of things, because obviously, we had a leaders conference recently, and we obviously a big thing for that was AI, but it's around more encouraging all of our leaders, and it's not even a request, it's almost a mandate. And I feel that I shouldn't be having to stand in front of leaders and mandate the fact that we need to understand how we are adapting using AI. But ultimately what I'm excited about, and it's really easy, I guess, I'm excited about, from people perspective, about being able to help change some of the processes that they have to do, which they would see as kind of low level, more mundane, boring work, and being able to actually change that environment for them and actually put them into an environment where they're actually doing more interesting work, and what that means to changing the people environment and the culture. What we can deliver for the customer as we leverage AI, I mean, customers obviously are our lifeblood. So as we think about innovation, product, technology, I mean, we're obviously an automotive, and people might know us as an automotive service company, and obviously we deal with hundreds of thousands of cars, and that doesn't go away. There's still a piece of metal somewhere that needs to be loved, it needs to be transported, it needs to be stored, it needs to be repaired. But ultimately, with all of the innovation that we can provide, what does that deliver for our customer? And I'm really excited about the prospects of delivering a more efficient, faster, better quality product with more insight and data, and to help them inform decisions. I'm really excited about what that can bring and what we've got that going on. And then of course, I'd probably talk about the efficiencies, and we talk about efficiencies and productivity, where every company out there, with the increasing cost base that we've got, consumers want and customers want the price to go down, but everything else in our organisation is going up. So how do we create efficiencies that allows us then, of course, to produce further? Obviously, we talk about maybe profit, but profit so we can put back into the organisation to help us grow. And we've got really big, significant growth plans, but we can only do that if we're actually producing and self-funding that growth. So I'm looking at this as saying, look, we could look at it in one sense and go, it's going to be completely disruptive and we should all be right. No, as Priya said, we have a plan, we have a game plan. We've got big systems and platforms and processes today. It's not rip it up and start again. It's where can we place AI in to help that current plan? It doesn't mean that my business model changes. It's still the same that it was yesterday as it was today, knowing AI. It just helps. Technology is going to advance quicker because the developers can use AI now to develop quicker with arguably better quality code, and it can test it. All of this is just going to create more speed that ultimately will help our customers. So I'm really excited about what that will bring for us. Obviously, clearly what it does for disruption for the industry, but I see that all as opportunities. And just here's one example. If it goes to fleet ownership, more fleet ownership, we know that's happening, and there's less personal ownership. Fast forward in that world, we talked about where there's going to be more autonomous cars, and there's big fleets of autonomous cars. Well, when that car will know that it needs servicing, or it knows its tyres need changing, or it knows that something's wrong, that car overnight will have to drive itself somewhere to a centre. That centre, you're going to need people to come in and be able to do that. We are set up to do it. So I think actually these advancements actually really helps our organisation. So really excited about what it can bring to us.
And I hope our audience and our listeners can really take that and apply it to their own automotive businesses. Yeah. Because no matter if you are a company like Cox Automotive, if you're an independent dealer, if you're a fleet company, this AI and putting it into your existing strategy and implementing it within your business is something that can be taken throughout the automotive industry. 100%. So thank you so much for being on today. We had so much more we wanted to cover, but we've had such an interesting conversation, both about automotive, AI, and just AI in general. So
and the Terminator.
And the Terminator.
Well, it had to come up, didn't it?
And even a little reference to football there as well. We're
going to carry on talking about that.
Yeah.
Cameras are off.
But thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate having you on.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for tuning in to the latest episode of Talk Auto. Feel free to email in to us with the details in our show notes if you'd like to appear as a guest, have any questions or topics that you'd like us to cover.
Absolutely. And you can also follow us wherever you get your podcasts or give us a watch on the Cox Automotive YouTube channel. So like, follow and subscribe, and we'll see you next month for another episode of Talk Auto.